Jesus in My Life, Episode 2. I remember that night I got high and I put the gun to my head and I said, I just need to end this. My life's a mess. I hate my life. And I think God had mercy for me in that moment. And before I pulled the trigger, I had a vision. Welcome to Jesus in My Life, a podcast with Rob and Jack, where we interview everyday people like me and you about their extraordinary experiences with our Savior, Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Jesus in My Life podcast. We're so excited that you're tuned in, and I am excited that I get to interview my co-teammate, my teammate in this podcast, Jack. Jack, so glad that you're here.
As am I.
And so we're going to get right into it. And Jack, why don't you go ahead and share, what was your life growing up in terms of relationship with God or any kind of, conclusions that you had growing up? Why don't you share with our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I grew up in San Francisco, and I went to Catholic school my entire life. I come from a Mexican family, and Catholicism is deeply ingrained within my family structure. So I always went somewhere where they talked about God. But the truth of the matter is that God was otherworldly to me. He wasn't personal,
Okay.
right? I grew up never doubting that there was a God, but he was over there and I was here. And quite honestly, I always viewed him as ready to find something wrong with me to send me to hell.
Yeah.
Is really the impression I had growing up, even from a young age. I feared God more than I respected him or wanted to know him.
Now, did that come primarily from your parents in terms of, did you go to Catholic Mass and do all that too?
So with Catholic school, we had to go to church every once in a while. Like we would have like a school-wide Mass type thing. And then we also went to church at certain times a year. Holy Week, we went to church, and sometimes my mom would drag us to church on Sundays. But my dad didn't go to church. Okay. So I think that left us with the excuse of not wanting to go. And since Dad wasn't going, we wouldn't sometimes have to go. And so my mom would force us to church once in a while, but it wasn't very often that we absolutely had to go. Yeah.
Got it. So why don't you share then, just growing up, preteen into your teen years, what describe your life growing up in that season, in that time of your life? Yeah.
Well, so I grew up in the Mission District of San Francisco, which is, if you visited there today, a very different neighborhood than it was when I grew up in the 80s there. It was a rough neighborhood. On my block alone, there were 3 liquor stores. Okay. Later on, when I was old enough to know what was happening at one of those liquor stores, found out it was a drug operation. I actually saw, waiting for somebody to pick me up. I lived on the second floor, and I was waiting for somebody to pick me up. I was looking out the window. So I actually saw somebody drive up, pull out a shotgun and aim it at the guys that were selling drugs in front of the store. Wow. And just literally witnessing that. Crazy, right? Like, you're just like, what? Is this actually happening? This is stuff I see in movies, not in real life. Sure. So that's kind of just the neighborhood I grew up in. Luckily, I think I look back in my life and I think this was God's mercy on me. Sure. But I saw it as a curse when I was younger. But in first grade, I got glasses. And being the irresponsible, clumsy kid I was, I broke them a lot. And so my parents ended up getting me, the big, giant military glasses. Yeah. That, I looked terrible in them. But those were the glasses that were durable and were going to not be broken by me. So, wearing glasses as a little kid, you get, oh, he's the nerdy kid. Yeah. Oh, he must like computers, And so it actually impacted me to stay at home more. and I ended up playing video games way more than going out. And,
Sure.
Thinking about some of the kids I was hanging out with really at an early age and where they ended up in jail, right? Like it was like I said, a really bad neighborhood. So I ended up becoming more of a homebody. Not that I was innocent in any way, shape, or form, right? Like my parents loved me. They took care of me, but they didn't give me many boundaries. I could do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. I mean, I think this is crazy because I can't imagine my kids doing this.
Right.
But I used to, I think like in 6th grade, FAO Schwartz, was a toy store downtown San Francisco. I would ride the public bus by myself without telling anybody what I was doing. I literally get on the bus right there. And then, because they let you play with the stuff in there, I'd just hang out for a few hours in the store.
Wow.
And then I'd come home, right, by myself without telling anybody. And like, I can't imagine
how times have changed.
Yes. Right. I can't imagine my 11-year-old son just disappearing for a few hours. And this is before cell phones, right? Like my parents, if they wanted to, would know where to find me, right?
Sure. Wow.
But that's just the kind of freedom I had. So when you have that kind of freedom, you get exposed to things that no parent wants their kid to be exposed to. And those things that you get exposed to at a really early age kind of really affect your thinking. So by 6th grade, pornography was introduced to me at my friend's house, and it just corrupts your thinking. Yeah. Right. And so I always I knew it was wrong because I'd had enough of the Bible told to me that I knew that I was a sinner. Yeah. Right. So I was always afraid that I was going to die and go to hell. Because I knew that that's my lifestyle. That even though I seemed like the kid, I got good grades in school. I knew how to behave at home. I was doing crazy stuff outside of the house at my friends' houses. I might not have been hanging out in the street, but I was hanging out at friends' houses. Yeah. And by the time I got to freshman year, I finally convinced my parents to let me get contacts. And so I finally got attention from girls at that point in time. And so like my life really became focused by my 9th grade became on drinking, drugs, and women. That's really what my life became all about going forward. But something happened at that same time period that really gave me a juxtaposition of two different lifestyles, right? And so my mom, I think in 8th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, she converted from Catholicism to Pentecostal Christianity. Yeah. Quite honestly, I thought she was crazy. Yeah. But I knew she loved Jesus. Yeah. But what ended up happening is my aunt in Mexico got diagnosed with stage 4 terminal ovarian cancer. Wow. Basically, you're going to die. Go get your house in order. Spend time with your loved ones. There's nothing we can do for you. Wow. My mom wasn't having it. Yeah. She was prayed, and this is stuff I found out later. I just knew my aunt was moving from Mexico to the United States. And what my mom had done was convinced her that I've prayed about this and I believe God's going to heal you. But you need to come over here. And so she convinced her to come from Mexico to come live with us. Yeah. And my mom started bringing her to General Hospital in San Francisco. And then again, they told her the same thing, diagnosed, there's nothing we can do for you. You're going to die, it's too far gone. But my mom wouldn't give up. Her and her friends kept praying. Wow. And my aunt got accepted into an experimental treatment where they were going to do this targeted radiation on her. She had to sign her life away. Like this treatment could have killed her, basically. And I think they had her like in kind of like an MRI type machine during this. My dad was telling me about it. Well, she ended up getting healed through that. Like they were expecting to have her in there for like 24 hours or something. And then I think within like 2 hours, they couldn't detect the tumor anymore. Wow. Right. Now, again, I didn't know about all this later, but what I witnessed as a 13-year-old was a woman that was living in my house that was supposed to die was healthy. Wow. And, she's still alive now, almost 30 years later. Wow. Cancer-free. It's never come back. Wow. Right? From going from terminal. And so what that left me with is that this God that my mom followed, this Jesus, was actually real.
Yeah.
But that was a really tough thing for me because by this time I was ingrained in my lifestyle. I loved my sin. The truth is, I loved it.
Yeah.
That was what I lived for. And I knew that the God that had healed my aunt was in opposition of my actions. And so that made it even more difficult, more guilt-ridden,
Sure,
and more fearful because I didn't know who he was and what he was, how he was for me and how he wanted to save me. I didn't know that till many years later. So that was really kind of my life, growing up. My mom was a powerful witness of Jesus. She'd bring in homeless people off the street and feed them inside the house. And I'd be like, Mom, what are you doing? This is crazy. Like, you don't know what they're going to do to you. And she's like, I saw drug addicts and alcoholics healed because somebody cared about them. Yeah. Right. Wow. I remember this one time where this guy came and he looked normal. And he's like, hey, is your mom around? And I came to find out he was one of the homeless people that she was bringing into the house. Wow. Her love and her preaching and everything else had caused him to turn his life around. And he had come to tell her how thankful he was. I'm
curious, Jack, to earlier you had talked about how your dad was not much of a religious person, not a churchgoer. So what was that like? I mean, did you see some contentiousness there between your mom and your dad in terms of what she was doing and the ministry that she was allowing God to lead her? And then what did that do for your dad? Yeah, that's a great question, Rob, because my parents, my dad is born in America. He's Mexican, but he was born here. Yeah. Right? He grew up at a time period where it wasn't cool to be Mexican. And so he tried to play off as he was a white person. Sure. Sure. He changed his name from Joaquin to Jack, which is why I got the name Jack. I see. And my mom was from Mexico, 8th grade education, right? And she immigrated into the country at a young age. They were polar opposite people. Like they're on a cultural level, they just didn't see eye to eye. Yeah. On language, they didn't see eye to eye. So they didn't have much of a relationship. My dad worked, and then he had a second job that he did at night, and then he hung out with his friends on the weekend. They didn't spend time together. So my mom just did what she did, my dad did what they did, and they lived separate lives in a lot of ways. Sure. Well, my dad got offered an early retirement at 13, and he took it, and he was home. His life completely changed. And that was a weird tension period for me because my dad didn't care that she went to church before, but now he cared because he was around. And so he would put her down about going to church so often. And because I didn't value church, I kind of sided with him. It's like, why would I want to go there? He doesn't go. Why would I want to go? So I had two very different lives presented to me at home. My dad would drink. I remember coming home one day when my mom was not around and smelling the air and being like, what is this weird smell? Why am I getting lightheaded? Why do I feel weird? Later on, I found out, he was at home smoking marijuana with his friends when my mom wasn't around. Wow. And just a very different life, right? At home, I experienced. And my life identified more with my dad's lifestyle. Yeah. And I used that to justify a reason not to go to church. Got it. So, yeah, that's good. So share then now where we are in the story. So this was the lifestyle that you chose and you saw literally your aunt healed and your mom's witness. And I mean, what did that do now for you? Obviously, it seemed like there was some sort of internal conflict there and maybe some deeper questions that you were asking, maybe quietly. Yeah, absolutely. I think the decision I had made in my heart is that someday I'm going to choose my mom's God. Interesting. But I don't want it yet. Yeah. You were too happy with the lifestyle that you were living. Yeah. And looking back, I don't think I was happy. Sure. I would honestly say as a Christian now that I've had more fun as a Christian than I ever had doing everything the world told me I would enjoy. I felt guilty about the stuff that I did or regretted the people I hooked up with, that kind of thing, or the sickness after drinking too much, like all this stuff, miserable. Yeah. I can't say I've done anything that I'm proud of with my old life, right?
But I was fully convinced this is what I wanted. This is what I needed. This is what would satisfy me, And so I was willing to hear about that God, but I started learning more about Jesus and what it meant to have him forgive you. And so I started kind of comprehending that more. And my mom was always preaching to me, in a really loving way. She was really cool about it, and I think her greatest gospel sharing was really her lifestyle. She lived the Jesus that I did not see taught in school, because I went to Catholic school, right? I was learning about religion, but I didn't see it lived out in anybody else except my mom. And so that I knew that God was real. Well, fast forward, I've graduated from high school. I've moved out of my house, and I'm living on my own, and my lifestyle is getting more and more dark, really dark. And I start having like depression. I start having suicidal thoughts. And there was a time period I was living with a roommate at the time. He was a pretty hardcore dude, He had a gun collection. Okay. And he had a work project where he had to leave the house for about 3 months. And I just took full advantage of that, and I had people over my house all the time. Sure. I quite honestly, Rob, looking back, I can't remember much of those 3 months. It's like a black hole of debauchery and drunkenness, and I literally have a whole of my life there. I don't remember much of it. But when my roommate got home, he went into his room, and he's like, he came to my room, and he's like, "Where are my guns?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "All my guns are gone, except for the one I took with me. Where are they at?" And he was livid. He wanted to, beat me up, really, right? Sure. But he was my brother's best friend, so he held back because of that. And he handed me his gun, and he goes, "You go find out. I can't even look at you right now. You take this and you go find out who took my stuff."
Wow.
And I mean, I wasn't a violent person,
sure,
and that day he left because he was so angry. And I was contemplating going through my mind, like, who's been over the house, who could have done this, plotting, like, how do I shake him down with this gun? Like, and I just looked back and I said, I can't do this. This isn't me. Right. What have I gotten myself into? And I remember that night I got high, and I put the gun to my head, and I said, I just need to end this. My life's a mess. I hate my life. And I think God had mercy for me in that moment. And before I pulled the trigger, I had a vision of me in a grave and my mom crying over the gravesite. And that was enough to hold back my finger from pulling the trigger. And I took my eyes off of myself and put them on the person that I knew would be hurt the most if I took my own life. And I put the gun down. I called my parents, my mom really, and I said, "Hey, I want to move back in with you guys. I don't want you to ask me why, but I need to move back in with you guys." And she's like, "Yeah, that's fine. Please come home." And I'm so grateful that they were so generous about that.
Sure.
My roommate came home. I said, "I'm sorry. I don't know who did it. I'm going to pay you back for everything that was stolen. But I'm moving out."
Yeah.
And he by that time had calmed down, and he's like, "All right." And he's not happy with me, but he was willing to accept that. So I moved back in with my parents, and I met a girl at this time period. It's interesting going back a little bit.
Yeah.
This friend of my mom's was, witnessing to me, and I was being honest with him. I was like, I'm not against God, but I like women too much.
Right.
And I want to do what I want to do with them.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not supposed to. And he goes, "Well, you never know. God could use a woman as well to reach you." And I just like, okay, cool. I'm okay with that. Yeah. If he wants to send me a cute girl, I'm cool with that, right?
Yeah.
I'd moved back in with my parents. The day I moved out, I went out with my friend, and I met a girl who was, in my opinion, was completely out of my league. But because it was out of my league, I didn't feel bad trying for it because I was expecting to get rejected. But she actually talk to me, and I got her phone number, and I found out she was a Christian, and I was just like, what, you are? Like, and so my interest in her kind of went up, because I remember talking to that guy about it.
Yeah.
And our relationship didn't work out. Like, there was some problems there as well. But she gave me a Bible, and she would often tell me to read it to her.
Wow.
And so I started reading the Bible, right?
Wow.
Okay, so I'm living with my parents at this time, and I start having these series of dreams, Rob, like these extremely vivid dreams that just rocked my world. And the first one's kind of really long, but it was like basically the book of Revelations in my mind, right? Wow. And I remember I was so disturbed by this dream. I got up and I wrote it down. Wow. Because I just was like, I've never had a dream like this. So vivid, so many, I could recall all of it. I can still see most of it in my mind right now. Wow. And I told it to the girl at this time, and she's like, well, duh, God's trying to talk to you, right? Like, he's speaking to you. And I'm like, no, it was just a weird dream. I didn't want to accept that. Yeah. Well, after living at my parents' house for a couple of months, I got an opportunity to move somewhere else and be on my own. And by this time, I had made a decision that I needed to cut off most of my old friends. Sure. Right. I didn't know who betrayed me, so I cut everybody off. And most of them didn't follow up with me, so they really weren't really my true friends. Right. And so I'm living by myself. My only real strong relationship with another person is this girl, and that's not going well. But I have another dream, and in this dream, I was like in a cloudy, misty place. There's nothing I could see except a silhouette of a man. And I knew who that man was. It was Jesus. Wow. And he said to me, Jack, when are you going to change? And I said, I'm going to do it soon. I'm going to do it soon. And he asked me that question 3 times. Wow. And then I woke up, and I just was like, oh my gosh, what is up with these weird dreams? I'm freaking out. Like, what is going on in my life that I'm having these dreams? And I'm trying to find reasons to discredit it, right? Sure. Well, my relationship with this girl completely fell apart, and I was in a sad place, And again, I didn't have much of a relationship with my old friends. I kind of just hung out with family at this point in time. Yeah. And I had a third dream. This dream is, I will share this dream because I think it's very pivotal. But in this dream, I was at a casino, and I was betting at a table, and it was kind of like a roulette table, but it was vertical, and you would bet on these symbols. And I would win and lose. I would win and lose. I'd win and lose. And I decided that I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop gambling. I just need to cut from this risky life. Yeah. Right. That's really what it was representing. Yeah. And the dealer behind the table was like, why would you want to stop? This has been doing great. You should keep going. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I'm all in. And I went all in. Wow. And then he spun the wheel. And then his voice changed from something human to something literally demonic. Sure. A laughter. And he said, you've been gambling with your life, and today you lose, and you come with me. Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm freaked out in my dream. And I just remember all the things my mom told me, right? Like, I claim the blood of Christ in my life. In my dream, I'm claiming the blood of Christ. I'll accept your Holy Spirit. God, please just give me one more try. Please, one more chance. And then I wake up. Wow. And I pick up my phone. It's right next to me. And I call the person that represented God in my life, right? My mom. Yeah. And I answered. I was like, Mom, I'm scared. And then she can't hear me. She's like, hello, hello, hello. And then it clicks. It dies. What? And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So I call the girl that I was a Christian. I call her, same exact thing. She can't hear me. What? And I'm completely freaked out.
Of course.
And then I wake up. It was a dream within a dream.
Whoa.
And this time I pinch myself, and I'm like, okay, I am actually awake now. Yeah. What was that? That is bananas, right? And I think about my dream, and I'm like, maybe God is trying to talk to me. Not like, you don't need your mom. You don't need this girl. You need to deal with me. Yeah. And so I pick up the Bible that girl gave me. Most of the time I only read it. I only read it when she asked me to read it. Yeah, sure, right. But I pick it up, and I'm like, I don't know what to read. So I just open to the middle, and I my eyes land on Psalm 119. Little did I know that's the longest chapter in the entire Bible, right?
Right.
But it was, I believe the Bible was a New King James Version. And so I'm gonna pull that up and read from that version, because I think it's very appropriate to how it got my attention. Let's see here, Psalm 119. The very first words I think it just opened my Bible. I don't know where to start. And my eyes go straight to verse 9. Okay? This is pre-morning. The sun's not even out. I'm woken up from a nightmare. And then this is the first thing. Consider the context of my dream, right?
Sure.
A lifestyle where I've been living wrong, and if I'm not cleaning it up, I'm destined for eternity in hell. Like that, I knew this. This is what I see. How can a young man cleanse his way? Well, I'm a young man. This thing's talking
to me right now. Yeah.
By taking heed according to your word. Basically, God said to me in that moment, I knew God was speaking to me.
Yeah.
Jack, do you want to change your lifestyle? Do you want to clean up your life? Well, pay attention to my word.
Wow.
And so I start reading Psalm 119. And if you know Psalm 119, it's all about the word of God and the impact it has, the assurance it brings into your life, how it enlarges your heart for him, how it brings security into your life. I mean, like everything. I'm reading this and I'm reading this and I'm reading this and contemplating my life, contemplating my dream. And I get to verse like 100, and let me find it here. This is a long chapter. I think it's verse 145. I cry out with my whole heart, hear me, O Lord. I will keep your statutes. I cry out to you, save me, and I will keep your testimonies. And then this verse is what got me. I rise before the dawning of the morning, and I cry for help. I hope in your word. And at that very moment, I pull up the blinds on and the sun is just coming up. And I just break down.
It's like Jesus was meeting you right there.
Oh, yeah. I broke down. I just cried. It just overwhelming tears. Wow. I knew God was speaking to me. Yeah. And I said, okay, God, I don't know what this looks like, but I'm tired of living my life my way. I surrender my life to you. From now on, you tell me what to do.
Wow.
And I truly believe that at that moment in my life is when I truly became a regenerated Christian, somebody who truly had committed their life to, and I believe I received the Holy Spirit, because after that day, reading the Bible was no longer like reading Chinese.
Yeah.
I was connecting with it.
Yeah.
Like I was it was making sense to me. And so that's how I became a Christian, Rob.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about Jesus in my life. Wow. I mean, just the back and forth as you share your story, Jack, of God, showing you that he's here, he's present, and even in the midst of your mess, I mean, a message emerged, and wow, what an incredible story. Remind us, how old were you when you came to Christ?
I believe it was late 2001. So I think I was 23.
Wow.
I think that sounds right to me. Yeah, 23.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man,
yeah.
Such a pivotal time. Of course, anytime Jesus comes into our life is so pivotal and life-changing. And I know many people who are listening to this podcast can relate, and maybe this is a time where they can accept Christ in their lives. Maybe they've either physically or figuratively, they have got a gun to their head and they're wanting to end it. What would you say to that person to encourage that person?
I would want to tell them that God has a plan for them.
Yes.
And it's not to end their life, but to improve their life. Yeah. My life was a mess because of myself and the choices I had made and the things that had happened to me. But God took me out of that darkness. This God who I had sinned against my entire life reached out to me and had mercy. And he has taken me from darkness into light. And my life is so completely different now. It's filled with assurance.
Yes.
I used to fear death. Now in some sense, I look forward to seeing my Maker one day. But I'm confident that He has a plan and a purpose for my life, and He gave me meaning. And my life isn't gotten easier, but it has definitely gotten better. And that's what God wants to do for you as well. It's never too late. If you're still breathing the breath, God's not done with you yet.
Excellent, excellent word. Well, that concludes our podcast today. Thank you, Jack, for sharing your story. Want to say that the foundation of our Jesus in My Life podcast comes from Luke chapter 8, verse 39. Jesus had just freed a man who was demonically oppressed, and Jesus delivered him, saved him. And Jesus says to this man, now go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you. And then the last part of this verse, so this man went all through the town proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. Jack just did that in sharing his story with you. And now you go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you. Thank you for joining us today.
And now a reflection on today's interview.
Listening to Jack's story, there are two specific takeaways after hearing what he shared. And the first thing is life always presents a fork in the road where it becomes really a matter of life or destruction. And God is patient with us in many, many ways, as Jack shared. And there becomes that fork in the road choice. What direction will I choose? What would be the best at this point? I love Jack's story because you may be in a fork in the road decision right now in your life. And I'm here to encourage you. Jack and I are encouraging you to choose life, to choose Jesus, who is the provider of true life and purpose. And then also the last takeaway would be, do not underestimate the power of God. And as we go through our lives, I think we dismiss truly God's power and His love and His wanting to woo us to Him. And God is always working. And despite our mess, to know that the power of God is constantly at work gives assurance that you can absolutely press in and join Him in this working in your life. So don't ignore that.
Thank you for listening to Jesus in My Life. New episodes release every Tuesday. Subscribe on your preferred podcasting platform so you don't miss a single episode. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please consider sharing this podcast with a friend or family member. If you would like to help our visibility online, consider rating us and posting a review on Apple Podcast. Have an awesome Jesus in My Life story? Contact us at jesusinmylifepodcast@gmail.com.